we've been talking a lot lately about the trades contractors out there, mechanical, HV, electrical, plumbing contractor businesses. And the challenge they have being folks that are in field, they're in the field all the time. They have employees in the field all the time. So it's big time chaos. And what we're going to look at or talk about is some of the IT readiness or the IT perspective in that world. Because you guys have clients in this space, and you understand how they use technology or where technology might trip them up. We're going to look at kind of the different stages of a contractor business and some of the top challenges they have that cause that chaos. Different types of technology are used. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I think the biggest thing that a lot of these guys and gals that are out there are wrestling with is how do I streamline this? How do I reduce the chaos? And how do I not, pay through the nose? How do I save money, or how do I be more efficient? And we'll go through that, and then at the end we'll have a QR code, and we'll talk about this nice giveaway. I think it's a great way for people to take a look at this, especially with the trades contractors. So let's jump right into it. Obviously, Succurri, IT service firm located in 3 states, Washington, Montana, Arizona. And IT support is a big part of what you guys do. You do a lot of other things, but you've been doing this for a long time and have seen a lot of things come and go with these trades contractors. And let's start breaking down some of these top areas of these business challenges that you guys see from an IT perspective. And Andrew, you work with a lot of clients in this space. Let's start talking about some of these challenges, and maybe the business life cycle that you see happening at each stage.
Terrific. Happy to do that. So with our customers, we've watched what I would call like 3 unique evolutionary stages of a trades business. And so, first it's you were a great technician at a previous company. You realized you could do this on your own, and you have gone on your own now. So, right, you're a smaller organization, maybe 2 or 3 people, and you want to be professional, like it shows here. You want to look and communicate, be centralized. So what we do to help customers at this phase is, specifically for the professional look, it's a lot about email communication. And what we find is when companies start on their own, they're looking for the low-cost solution, or they don't understand the difference between like a Hotmail account, and I'm probably dating myself by saying Hotmail, maybe Gmail.
Why don't you just say AOL?
Yeah, or AOL. Then you're like grandpa age. So making sure that the email is looking really professional and has all the functionality that the team needs. Being able to communicate clearly, which we see sometimes, like companies will have different domain names, and they're like different staff will have different domain names, different email systems. And so we do try and get that all centralized. The other one is calendaring. So like all of a sudden this technician realizes that they had a whole staff of people who are doing calendar management and scheduling for them, and now all of a sudden it's their responsibility. So having the ability to have a tools that they can do scheduling and see what other people's schedules look like. So we'll move to the next phase here of evolution. So now the company has been in business for a year or two. They're doing well because there's a tremendous need for people in the trades, and they've hired some technicians, and now they're like 5 or 10 people, and they've got all these people in the field, and they're like, what's going on with all these people? So what they do at that point is you get into what we call the centralized business operating system. So that might be terms you'll hear out there will be like CRM or enterprise management system. What it is basically is a tool or a piece of software that allows a company to have all their customers in one spot. It allows them to have their products in that one spot, and allows them to have their services that they can bill for. It's time tracking, and all the staff are entering data in one place. So it's really easy for everyone to see what is happening at each of the customers. It also allows for a lot more manageability of like how much time a technician is using. It allows you to start measuring performance. It starts to figure out if you have gaps or holes in that technician's billing, right? Like you have hours burning through the floor. Along with that is now that you have this critical business operating system, you have to expand it beyond the walls of your office. And so you'd have mobile device management. So now you're having this business operating system, maybe as an app or a web page on like an iPad or a mobile phone or a Microsoft Surface tablet. Now you have your team in the field. They have these devices. They can enter data. They can see orders, and you've become more streamlined. So let's go to the next phase of evolution here. So now you're scaling. So you've been in the business for 3-4 years now. You are used to these tools. They're part of your process. Everyone's using them. It's not up for debate, and you're dependent on them. But what happens from that is now you can start to scale your business. So you're going to grow beyond that 10 or 15 employees in the field, and now you're looking to be at the 20, 25, 30 staff members. So you need to be able to scale with that. What we see in that environment is that the support tools become really critical, and they kind of grow into this different level. So one of the things we don't have on here is fleet management. We hear this all the time with customers that are in the trades, is they need to know where the vehicle is that delivered the technician, because they need to know if that technician actually drove to that customer, if they're there, if they were there during the time they booked the billing. If they look at the route the technician took, was it like curly cues and ooh, we went to the coffee shop, or is it straight on the freeway, exit off, go to the location? Right. So that we see that, like I talked about, time entry becomes absolutely critical, and now they're selling lots of product. It's not like a couple $1,000 a month. It's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands a month of equipment, and it's not practical to have 2 or 3 or 4 people managing the accounting related to that. You have to have an inventory system that you can check stuff in, check stuff out. You can have a process so you can guarantee outcomes.
We kind of, I'm going to go back a slide. We kind of talked about some of the top challenges, and you kind of walked through there, field technician scheduling, fleet management isn't on here. But
vehicle tracking.
Vehicle tracking. There you go. Fleet management and vehicle tracking. So you guys are IT jocks. We're sitting here talking about phases of business and what a business is trying to do, these trade services businesses. And why do you know all this stuff? Why is it important that you guys know all this stuff? You're IT. Just fix my computers, man.
Yeah, thanks for asking and for insulting or hurting my feelings. But no, so in IT, we work across so many different industries, and although the technology behind each industry is relatively the same, the real power for the businesses is that we know how their individual industry runs, because they have individual technology needs. So I guess what I would say is we learned it as a necessity, because I need to know how people in the trades, their IT works in their industry. I need to know how IT in the medical field works, because the back end systems are almost identical, but ultimately the way we implement them and the front end systems are different. And like serving a patient in a clinic is very different than repairing an HVAC system at somebody's house. And the needs for each of those are different. So it's a necessity for IT to learn.
Well, and to add on top of that, I mean, to be fair, our business isn't much different from a framework, right? We have fleets that we have to manage. We have mobile device management. We have centralized business systems. These are really core components of a service industry, right? So while we are delivering a different service, our businesses aren't that much different, right? Yeah. So we're able to do a lot of our services remotely, which is nice, but we do have trucks out in the field, and we have technicians that are supposed to go from point A to point B and not take the curly Q routes, and so we have tons of inventory that is being delivered at a regular basis, and we need to be able to track it. We need to be able to track the time for billing. So what you see there isn't necessarily specific to the trades. It's specific to like the service industries and professional services.
Well, let's break down each of these phases and kind of talk through some specifics on, at that first phase, you're really trying to look professional, but you can't spend a ton of money. So you're trying to figure out what's the absolute tech that we need, and how do we make sure that we're getting help with that tech that we need when we need it, and basically it's all affordable, or at that stage.
Yeah, it's easy to get a cheap solution, right? Or we'll not say cheap, I would say inexpensive for what you're getting. We see a lot of people go down the route of like, oh, I get free email accounts with my website, and that makes me cringe because nothing in the IT world is free, right? So that there's going to be problems that come with that. And so getting into a centralized email platform that allows for collaboration has a dollar point to it, but you don't have to get the most expensive licensing of that platform. You maybe get the cheapest licensing, and then you have a spot to build into. So that there's lots of different ways to look at that. But the old school email, the POP accounts, the IMAP accounts, if those names are ringing a bell to you, we need to talk, because that's technology that died a long time ago.
Yeah. And just to go into that, because everyone likes to know kind of what we're doing. So we see the majority of our customers using Microsoft 365 email. The primary reason for that is it has built-in scheduling, calendaring, contact management. There's a lot of collaboration features. It does cost more than like a G Suite or Gmail, but it's not that much more. And one of the things, like I will tell you, like bar none, almost every trades company that comes to us, they have not usually G Suite. It's usually the free account, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is just not usable." The free account, though, comes with a really complex migration project to get them into the Microsoft 365. So, one huge way to save money is just start with Microsoft 365, because corporations around the world use that. It's a gold standard, and it will, like I will tell you, it will grow with your company. Versus if you buy the cheap account, then you're going to have to go to the Google account at some point because you need more features, and then that doesn't work, and then you're going to 365. And I'm telling you, it's like $5 an email per month. It's just not that expensive. Right. So you might as well start in the system that you never have to leave.
Well, and Google, in their infinite wisdom, doesn't provide any kind of support. It's a self-serve model. Definitely. The one thing that, and I listed a few different things out down here, but the one thing that is interesting about the way you guys do it is at different stages, we know people get over their head with needing support for their technology. And the thing that you guys have that I like is a support desk. It's like, hey, we don't have to have this big managed service. I would say necessary, and sophisticated, but we're not ready for that yet. Okay, great. You need help when you need it, and you don't want to pay a monthly contract. You're not hiring us at that level yet. There are companies who need that at some point, but you do need help when you need it, and you need expert help. And that's one of the things that I love your common sense approach when you talk about this is, okay, you don't need all the bells and whistles, but you need the basics, right? And when you get stuck, you need to help get unstuck, right? That was the part that when we've been talking over the years, is like, oh, that's the piece I think is really helpful for some businesses at an earlier stage.
Well, it's the cradle to grave concept. So I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? You're going to need some support. You need somebody to call, and your needs might be small to start with, but ultimately you have to have some of those steps. Like if your business is growing and you're not making those steps from an IT perspective, your business won't grow at the rate that you want it to. So we can talk all day about IT maturity, right? But
Sure.
The steps that you have to get there take time, but you need a guide to get you there.
Yeah. So when you talk about saving money, how does an IT firm help let's call it a phase one business, phase one contractor business save money? And I know there's a few different ways, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper, but when you think about it, as you go, the next phase is really, okay, we're earning money, we look professional, we might not have all the high-tech things, but we can deliver good service. We're getting good reviews on Google, we've got a business going. Now we're looking at it comes back down to cost, because everybody's cost conscious as they grow their business, typically. What are the things that you look at when you're helping people save money?
So for us, and like Grant mentioned, the cradle to grave concept, and I talked a little bit about getting into an email system that you can stay with forever. If you get into a system that is ultimately a dead end, you're going to spend money getting out of that system and getting into a new system. And there's going to be some momentum lost in your organization and time spent on that instead of working with customers. So the first strategic thing I would recommend is find a solution that can grow with you, find providers that can grow with you. So like a lot of managed services companies in the country have moved to a model where it's exclusively monthly contracts and they won't do any hourly support. What we realized is businesses have this evolutionary cycle they go on. And when they're small and they need that hourly support because they just don't know how much support they need, but they need it when they need it. And it's like for us, we have 5 levels of support that go from like pure hourly to a little bit of covered support to kind of managed to really managed and then ultra managed. Right. So, what that means is that customer just calls us and says, dial up my service plan, and we're off and running. They don't have to meet somebody else, learn new processes. They know what to expect. So, it's get into a system right off the bat that you can stick with that obviously meets your needs. What I would tell the people in the trades, especially, a lot of people start small, those companies grow really fast. Like in the trades, there's such a demand, they will grow really fast. So don't assume that you're going to be a 1 or 2 person company for 10 years. You're going to probably be a 1 or 2 person company for 6 months.
Well, and we're talking about this like, oh, you started your company last week or last month, or, you could have a company that has been at one level for a while, and now in this example starting to grow into phase 2, and you're really looking to, you grow fast, you need more capacity. And I love the way you guys talk about this, where it's like as your business grows, you need command of these certain things, specifically in the trade service businesses. Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about definitely. That.
Yeah, so we know when a customer is entering that second phase, especially in the trades, because we see that business operating system coming in, or they start talking to us about their challenges, right? Like, I'm having staffing issues, I'm having training issues, my service delivery is inconsistent, or the owner says, like, I'm in the field all the time and I'm undoing the work that I paid somebody to do. And so, when we hear about that, we know that they're entering the next phase. So we start talking about those things that they need to be aware of, right? Like, what is your business operating system? It will allow you to have command of your finances, your billing, your collection, your staffing. One of the systems we see pop up consistently in the trades is called Service Titan. And, for companies who use it, we've actually seen them have great success with it. What I'll tell you, though, is this is probably the most critical phase of any business. I think this is the phase where you make or break. And so it's the phase where you decide to grow, or it's the phase where you decide to shrink or retreat. And the reason that is because you have to take what was easy before and flexible, and now you have to make it firm and like a rigid process so you can get consistent outcomes. And
standard operating procedures.
Standard operating procedures, yep. And once you do that, then you're getting that delivery that you're looking for. The services all of a sudden happen consistently because you have a process. The staffing is easier because you have defined training. Your finances are manageable because you have a system to collect payments and bill, and it's very transparent. And so all of a sudden, all of those little hidden bleed spots where you were leaking efficiency disappear because you were now doing things by a process. And what happens is all that blood or bleed, that energy that you were spending on nothing, now gets to go directed towards your business. And that's ultimately where people jump into the next phase of scalability.
Yeah. This actually, we could probably just put this one slide up. And in fact, we probably need to have a whole conversation about this piece. But when you start getting to a level where you're looking at your IT spend, talk to me about that, because it seems like you could spend a lot on a lot of things, especially, and here's the one thing that I know, is when a business gets moving and shaking and you're busy, people grab little licenses for this here, or they do this, that, there, and and pretty soon it's kind of like in your personal world when you've got this and you go, oh, I bought that subscription and that subscription. It's why there's the apps that advertise, oh, we can go look at all your subscriptions and save you money.
You have a tool overload.
A tool overload.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's because everything's just moving real fast, which is a good thing, but you have this silent bleed. So share a little bit about what what goes on there and how you be looking at it.
So there's several factors from an IT strategy standpoint that really help reduce that bleed. Vendor management is, I would say, a huge one. So IT is a unique industry that it's new, right? Like really 30 years ago, it didn't exist. When I went to college, there was no degree you could get for it. And that was about 30 years ago. And
what's up, AOL?
So yeah, exactly. So what happens is not only is it a new industry, so it's not regulated, it's also an industry that every 5 years basically cannibalizes all the technology. So every 5 years, it's a new industry. Along with that, you have new vendors coming that have new technology. They're just figuring their processes out, and they're basically every 5 years cannibalizing themselves as well. So we never get to that point where you have really consistent, predictable service that you would get from like a really big company that's been around for 50 years. Like, telephone companies, the olden days, they had that thing figured out to a science. Like your phone always worked. They knew exactly where the problem was, but that doesn't happen in IT. But that's the level of expectation that companies have, is like, oh, well, if I buy the tool, it's just going to work. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And so what we find with vendor management is you need professionals who deal with these vendors on a daily basis to be able to say, no, what you're experiencing isn't okay. Like, let's get the vendor involved. Let's bring more pressure to it. I'm regularly invited to calls where I'm the customer advocate and I have to get in the ring with the vendor, and usually it's their technical resource. And, I have to basically dress them down because their technical resource doesn't want to do whatever is necessary to deliver the product or service that was sold to my customer. And usually it's a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of motivation, it's a lack of process. And so, companies, customers that work with us or just get so frustrated with their vendors, and then that stalls them out because they think like, oh, well, I bought the wrong product. Maybe not. Maybe you just need someone who can get in there and talk technology and hold your vendor accountable.
Well, and potentially even worse, where you think that it is your vendor and then you make a change to the other vendor, and I can guarantee you the grass isn't greener on the other side. Yeah. So you have this huge capital cost, and you get there in a lot of time and effort and disruption in your business, and you get to the next system, and you're like, why do we move? Right. So having that vendor management and having what I like to call the vendor bulldog, where we go in and tear up the vendor and make them do what they're supposed to do, that becomes very, very important.
And so when you talk about vendors, you're like software vendors, people you buy computers from, phone systems.
Yeah, all the above. I mean, don't listen to ISPs, but we have to deal with ISPs all the time, internet service providers, that the first thing out of their mouth is it's not their fault. Like, they don't even start troubleshooting and they say it's not their fault. So we have to go in there and provide a sufficient amount of evidence that it is their fault. Tell them how to do their job before they actually fix it. It's not much different with other vendors as well, is that people they don't want to take responsibility for it.
So it can be a big source of bleed because you don't have anybody internally on your staff that can handle.
I mean, you think about the amount of efficiency that you'll lose, one, from having one of your employees sit on the phone with that vendor and just getting frustrated and spinning your wheels. I mean, we're talking hours of loss. But not to mention, if that problem is actually impacting the rest of your staff, that multiplier of hours of loss, is huge. And that's where it starts to get really, really expensive. You start doing the math on that. I mean, we're talking thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars that you potentially are losing just from your systems not working correctly.
Right.
Yeah. And not to deviate too much, but, if anyone has talked with me, since a lot of my job is life cycle of equipment management and all the systemic issues and symptoms that come from that. So you look at vendor management, and let's say you buy a business operating system, and I spent a few minutes telling you like how critical that is for your business, right? You go from disorganized to potentially scaling. That business operating system is the foundation for that. Well, if you buy a business operating system from a vendor that's not good at delivery, like, one, your staff are not going to participate in it, so you're not going to get the outcomes you want. You're going to have a lot of resistance in the company. I literally can't tell you how many times I've seen companies abandon their business operating systems because the vendors they chose didn't participate and didn't meet them for what they sold. And like, I could tell you, like, if I look at a company and it's a certain age and it's at a certain size, I can almost pinpoint the vendor, the business operating systems that they have lost. Like, I'd be like, have you had 3 that you've maybe misimplemented? Because it's a necessity, right? They keep coming back to that same issue. That is the solution. They implement it, it fails. Then they go back and lick their wounds. A few years go by and they hire someone new and they say, you have to do this. They do it again. They don't put the effort into it. The vendor doesn't participate. They fail. That cycle keeps going on. So vendor management is really huge.
Well, and I think you point out something that's interesting that we do come across a lot is that you can't just cut a check, right? There's the cost of the software, but the company, the ownership has to be involved in implementing that system, and it has to come from the top down. Because if a middle level decides that says, I don't really, I'm not that into it, I'm busy, I've got other things going on, it's never going to make it across the finish line. And so from an ownership perspective, like, hey, we just bought this amazing system that'll do all these fun things. And why doesn't it work? Well, because it was never actually carried all the way through. It has to have, cutting the check is only part of it, right? You assume that you're going to be multiples of 3 in terms of labor to like what you actually paid for the system. You have to have your staff involved. You have to have the training. You have to spend the time to implement the system correctly, to put your processes in there. These things aren't coming off the shelf like you turn it on and all of a sudden your business miraculously grows, right? You have to put all your processes into the system to make it work.
Or my favorite is a software vendor will sell you licensing that you don't need when you don't need it. So it's like, oh, you're gonna need these 10 licenses when really you're not gonna need those 10 licenses until
For like
6
3 years.
a year later,
Yeah.
and you need 3 to start.
But if you buy today, I'll give you a significant discount on these licenses that you don't need. You know, so I mean, we get pressure like that all the time too. You're like, oh, I know that's the cool feature. I want to have that. I'm like, you got a long ways to go before that cool feature even will work. So understanding that buying the Ferrari when you need the Ford, you know, slow your roll. You'll get there.
Yeah.
And talking about licensing, so one of the things too is licensing, especially as we're entering a subscription-based world, right? Everyone wants to be subscription-based licensing now, and it's hard to navigate, especially if you're in a Microsoft 365 world. You're looking and they have a catalog of like 300 products, and you're like, which one do I use? Okay, so it's higher.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, and they all do different things, and if you don't know what one of them does, all of a sudden you're buying like the wrong license. So, just to give you an example, like we tend to sell Microsoft 365 Business Premium. It's kind of the balance of cost and functionality for a medium-sized business, right? Like 10 to 50 employees. That we feel like that has all the services, the costs are right, it's the best value. I can't tell you how many customers we get that we onboard that are smaller than that, who have less needs, and they're buying licenses that are like the E3s, E5s, because that's what their previous person told them to do because it will cover everything. And you're like, yeah, that's for a Fortune 500 company. You don't need that license. Right. And and they don't know because it's the subtlety of that. So having a provider like a Succurri that can go through and say, well, what's your need? You can save tons of money on licensing.
Yeah, back to understanding my question earlier about, well, why do you guys care so much about their stage of business and what they need and why they, why we weren't talking about IT? I mean, it's because the business runs all the technology, right? What you need runs the technology. This next one I find completely fascinating because I never really thought about it this way before. So talk about the employee inefficiency bleed, and at the end of this, we can kind of come back to. Anyway, I'll shut up and let you talk.
Perfect. So when we talk about silent bleeds, there's 3 things on this list that are I'm very passionate about, and there's lots of things, but the employee efficiency bleed is one where I consider it a hidden bleed, the silent bleed, right? It's nearly impossible to put a finger on, but it impacts every company. So the scenario that I encounter a lot is the customer will say, why do I have to replace the computer after 5 years? And we'll talk about the increased risk of failure and so forth. But ultimately, a 5-year-old computer is 5 years behind today's software, and it's going to be less efficient and slower than a new computer. And so this equation basically takes into account, let's say there's a 5-minute efficiency bleed on a single staff member over a year, which basically equates to 166 hours a year. You multiply that by the average of $35 an hour, and you've lost $5,800 a year in efficiency. A new computer for that employee is probably $1,200. So, you've got, what is that, $3,600 that you've left on the table that you could have been using somewhere else, right?
But the computer only has to be replaced every 5 years, and that's $1,200.
Yeah.
This is annually. So you start doing the math on that. So you're $30,000 in efficiency loss when you only have to replace the computer once every 5 years, and we'll say $1,200, $1,500, right? So that's a massive amount of loss over a 5-year period.
Yeah, and what I try and say is
one employee.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one employee.
Yeah, that's one employee. You magnify that then by all the employees you have, and all of a sudden it's hundreds of thousands. And all of a sudden, the business owner is like, oh, maybe this is why I'm having a really hard time moving this thing forward or this business forward, because I feel like I spend all my energy pushing people. And well, when you realize you're losing tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year of efficiency that are just dripping out the bottom, well, what could you do with all that extra efficiency?
The couple scenarios that I've seen and been a part of myself are when a nagging problem continues and you kind of put a patch on it and you don't really address it, and it continues to pop up. And I was like, man, why don't we? What you don't realize is that is an efficiency killer. And let's talk about the real. Why, the word efficiency, this isn't a big corporation we're talking about. It's just getting to emails faster, being able to have a schedule that is updated when it needs to be updated quicker so you can serve client. We're talking about field service contractor.
It's information that it needs to be where you need it, right? So you need to be able to access information when you need it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing that it just drives people nuts. And actually everybody, I think, is getting more used to, I'll date myself here, when Bill Gates talked about technology as, electricity. Someday it'll just work. Like lights, you turn on the lights, it'll just all work. Well, we all know what happens when our tech doesn't work. We all have a hissy fit. At least I do. It's like, why isn't this working? And if you don't have people to call on that understand your business and your situation and know what tech you have, it's really hard to get support, and then you're just stumbling around the dark like everybody else. So there's not only can you save money, literally save money, you can build in efficiency to your business that actually makes you more competitive, because you can stay up and run.
Yeah, and just to kind of comment on Bill Gates' comment, I mean, obviously he hit some home runs, or a lot of home runs in his career, but ultimately I don't envision a day where technology just works, right? That's a dead technology. That's a technology that's not advancing, and that's not what humans generally want. So good luck on that one.
You mean there's not an easy button that you just push and everything just works?
I thought that was Apple.
They do a pretty good job of making it seem simple.
It's the Jedi mind trick.
It is a Jedi mind trick. It just costs you 3 times as much is all.
Well, sometimes you get what you pay for.
There you go. It's true. It's true. Service and product. So here are the things we started with. We're like, oh, what's going on out there? What can we talk about that's going to be valuable to people? Because that's what these webinars are always about, is how can we be more valuable to the people that we serve and to businesses out there. And so I always love this one. It's kind of like, if you've had these thoughts before, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, or thought about this earlier when you were doing this, but these are the things that like, if you have these signals going on in your brain, hey, our computers are running good enough,
they turn on, they operate throughout the day.
Yeah.
And that's an old school mentality, right? Like, hey, it functions. I'm able to browse the web. I had to close my browser or reboot a couple times during the day to get it to operate. Well, there's 5-10 minutes right there.
Yeah.
So that's that's over $11,000 a year if you have to reboot a couple times a day.
Sorry about that. You just get used to it working crappy, and then you just work it into your day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, as an owner of a business, you'll have staff, they may say something once or twice early on, just to say, hey, this isn't working. And if you don't address it because it's, 5 minutes, it's a glitch, then they stop telling you. And they just, like you said, they just make it part of their day, and they shift into lower gear based on the technology they have.
If they tell you at all.
Yeah.
I had a loose faucet upstairs that nobody ever told me about. I went up there to use the faucet and started moving around. I'm like, can anybody tell me these things? So, I mean, it's a plumbing analogy, but it's the same thing. I'm like, the plumbing's broken. Tell me that the plumbing's broken.
Yeah. And here, this next one is a huge signal, because this really means you're ready for some serious IT support. Because if you're the guy, or you have somebody internally that's the guy you always go to, that isn't formally trained in IT, but they're technical in nature, so you always load that person.
You mean the brother-in-law?
The owner or whoever.
What was the boyfriend.
The boyfriend of the brother-in-law, yeah.
Boyfriend, brother-in-law, the guy, I don't know. And it's like, that person is going, I have another job. Why am I doing this? And why does this always keep happening? Why do I have to do the work? Now, for a while that works, but after a while it breaks. And if you find yourself pushing up on that, that's a signal for you're up against the barrier that can be removed. And now it's about getting the right people in the right seat, doing the right job for the right budget. It's amazing what happens. So this last one's a little bit iffy, and I'll let you take this one, Andrew. So, hey, we already have somebody doing IT, and then there's always the trailing kind of in the background. Well, we have somebody.
Yeah. And so when I hear any of these, or especially when I hear them all together, what the customer is telling me is everything's great. And so when I come back to is like, well, why are we talking then if everything is great? And so, what I try and do is help them unpack, right? Because they have these beliefs that, I don't want to spend money. It's, the IT level I'm getting is probably what I'm spending it on, or it's as good as it's going to get. My team just lives with this stuff. It doesn't have to be that way. As you grow your business, you have to be able to have predictable results, right? And every dollar spent needs to produce value for you. So if you, I know for us, when customers come to us, oftentimes we retool their whole network because it's less expensive to buy the equipment up front. And we have way higher outcomes, or higher successful outcomes, with a network that has no ghosts and it has all the features the customer needs. So what we've done is we've translated what was probably a lot of silent inefficiency and bleeding in their current network into a single quote that had a dollar value that they could budget for and approve. And then we delivered 5 years of great service and successful, reliable operation. So sometimes you have to spend money to make money. And sometimes in IT, you have to replace equipment to make sure it runs successfully. And it's become our philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is always my favorite slide. Okay, we're not paid, this isn't the disclaimer. Be aware, this is for educational purpose only. This webinar doesn't constitute paid IT services. But this is always my favorite slide. It's like, give me the skinny, man. If I had to sit here and watch one slide, if I told people, hey, fast forward to this video, this recording, this is where I'd fast forward it to. So talk to me about what you recommend people do if they feel like there's IT bleed, if they feel like they're not getting the right level of support for the money they're spending. Give me the lowdown.
Yeah. So what I would say in this situation is, even if you like, so you talked about people who have recognized issues. I would say if you are really happy with how things are going, make sure you're talking to your team members, right? Like, so I'm coming from the perspective here of you're the small business owner, you're busy producing services and products all day. You're assuming things are great because no one's talking to you. Go talk to your team to make sure that they're in the same boat as you. And then you may find that you are identifying issues with your IT spend and the value you're getting. So, but when you look at your IT spend, what you want to, like I talked about once again, it's you want to have the right tools to start out with, so you know what the cost is going to be and you know what the outcome could be. Like when customers use our tools, we are very confident in the delivery of that service because we know it works and we know the vendors and we know how to manage that. So, the word guarantee is kind of scary, but like we pretty much guarantee the outcome that we sell because we have to live with it. So know where you want to go, make sure that there's a plan and get it there. You look at the value you're getting from your IT spend. So let's say you're spending $1,000 a month, but it's costing you $2,000 in lost time. You want to be aware of that. So like you said here, you're optimizing your energy, your profitability, your momentum, you're stopping that bleed by having a plan. It's not the low cost provider. I can guarantee you that is the least efficient way to go. It's not always the most expensive though either. There's usually a sweet spot in the middle.
Well, and I think going through it on an annual basis, looking at, it's house cleaning. You have to go through and look at what your spend is, have a professional go through and show you where your potential pressure points are, and do it on a regular basis. Have it as part of your budgeting, have it as part of your company retreat, whatever it might be. So at least you're always going through and looking at it, and those numbers aren't potentially slowly growing without your knowledge.
Yeah. And like for us, for our clients that are fully managed, we include basically life cycle and audit services as part of their recurring services. So like I meet with some customers monthly, quarterly, biannually, or annually, and we do this for them, right? And so we look at their Microsoft 365 licenses, and we know when they renew so that they don't keep an extra 10 licenses they don't need. We're looking at their security services, and we notice that, oh, John Doe doesn't have this security tool. You're paying for it. And then ultimately what we find out is John Doe has chosen not to be secure, and he's chosen to put the company at risk. So now we get them to use that service, and the company is getting benefit for it. But like I would say every company we take care of, we spend at least 2 to 4 hours a year of just looking at their services they're using and making sure that they're the right fit. So like if you're not doing at least that much as an independent business, you're not spending enough time. And we're super efficient, and we have a lot of automation that brings it to our fingertips. So you probably should expect 4 to 8 hours a year of critically reviewing your systems and your spend.
Okay, now the favorite time here. I'm looking. I've got Ezra has a question, and his question is: do you guys? Let's see. I'm kind of trying to figure it out, and make sure I'm translating correctly what he's saying. So do you guys look at software licensing as a service? Meaning, do you come in and can you evaluate licensing and say, hey, do we have the right licenses for what we need? Do you guys just do that, or does that have to be part of a larger project, a larger service agreement? I hope I'm asking that question right, Ezra, but
yeah, good question. So it's definitely included in our managed services. We do look at that. So I do an IT cost savings analysis for a lot of new people that I talk with. Some of that, if that information is provided, like, hey, here's my licensing, I'm more than happy to look at it and do some top level. We do need to have a lot of our systems in place and our tools in place to get down to the penny. But it's not hard to ballpark like, yeah, you probably have a problem right here and a problem right here. And these things right here probably can go away. So I've been doing it for so long that I can tell you pretty quickly where you're probably overspending. But like the down to the penny, down to the minute, we do need to get some little deeper dive in some of our tools in place.
Okay. One more question. Gary, he asked, do you guys help implement operating systems like ServiceTitan?
We don't implement it, but we do help the customers walk. What's that?
I said kind of. We are their Sherpas. We make sure that they get across the finish line. The vendor is ultimately the one they're probably going to have a package that they sell with the software. We are going to offer, or we're going to have dedicated engineers that work with the vendor to make sure that they're getting access to all the systems that they need to, that the platforms that they need to have are in place. Sometimes we're doing some data migration to get things there. We do have professional services groups that we work with, that we have internally, that can sometimes bridge gaps that the vendor doesn't. But ultimately, we, as a managed service provider, we're the ones that are going to make sure that the vendor is doing what they're accountable for and that they're saying that they're going to do, which is extremely important when you're doing an implementation like that.
And a follow-up question to that is, what about integration and automation? Because there's a lot of, that was the question from Gary, the follow-up.
Andy's team. Yeah, run with that, Andy.
Yeah, so we do have customers that will have us do third-party integrations for them. So let's say their business operating system, they want it to talk to, well, like this is a real example, their business system, they want to pull out customer information and visits, and then be able to send that to their marketing system so they can market to those customers to get a return visit, or like set up a recurring annual schedule for services. And so we do have a team of people who can do that. So like we build the program, I call the middleware program, and it talks to the business operating system. It pulls the data out. It then puts it into a format that we can then send to the marketing system, and then the marketing system can do their thing. Sometimes it's bi-directional, so that's just one example that we definitely can do that for customers.
Excellent. Well, that's it for questions. So I appreciate your guys' time. And then this last, I'll leave this up here for a little bit, but this is your guys', you want to give away this IT cost savings analysis. So earlier we were talking about stop the bleed, evaluate your IT plan. This is a no-cost service that you guys do. You can scan it here, and it'll take you to a page. So Grant, maybe talk a little bit about what this is real quick.
Yeah, I kind of consider this an IT gut check, right? So if you think that if you're in a situation where like, hey, either I know my stuff, need some help, or I think I'm doing great, it's a baseline, right? So we'll go through and point out where you stack up against where you should be. You'll figure out where the little some of the silent bleed is coming from, and ultimately you're going to get some significant value about understanding where your IT spend should be versus where you're at today.
Excellent.
Yeah, and you mentioned no cost, which we don't charge for it, but I do want to like flip that on its head a little bit, and like you basically get the chance to talk to Grant for an hour about your IT for your business. And Grant's got 20 plus years in IT experience. He's seen pretty much everything. He knows your scenario, right? Like unless you're something very, very unique, we've likely seen companies like you. And so what I like to think of it is like, this is an amazing consulting session, and Grant's likely going to leave you with a lot of thoughts and things to think about, and potentially some like rough outlines of plans, just by looking at your cost savings. And so what I try and tell customers or prospective customers is, don't think of this as like an audit where you have to have like, we're going to show you your deficiencies or there's shame associated or there's work done. Like, this is a complimentary consulting session by an incredibly skilled and experienced IT engineer and security expert. You are going to, when you walk out of that meeting, you're going to have a tremendous amount of value. And at the very least, your mind is going to be expanded to understand that the world of IT is a little bigger than you thought. And now you're going to know that there's a couple of paths to go down. So I would tell you, just scan the code and have a meeting. Like, it's a huge value.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you'll at least get to see what you get on the other side of that scan, because there's some really cool stuff of how he breaks it down. And yeah, it's impressive. I think this is a no-brainer for people. As always, we'll put this out on our YouTube channel. There might even be some video shorts out there as well. We do have a YouTube channel.
New content all the time.
New content all the time. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony.